Why does the same heartbreak find you in different faces? Why do the same betrayals, the same disappointments, the same invisible weight follow you, no matter how far you run or how much you change your outer world? It's not coincidence. It's not bad luck. There is something within you, something you've long tried to ignore, that is orchestrating these painful patterns. But what if I told you that this inner force isn't your enemy? What if the pain is trying to awaken you, and your liberation is hidden inside the very thing you're trying to escape? Stay with me, because once you understand this, your chaos will finally begin to make sense, and you'll never look at pain the same way again. Certainly, below is an expanded speech covering key points 1, 2, and 3 in approximately 2,000 words. The structure is continuous, introspective, and motivational, anchored in the emotional and philosophical tone of Carl Jung. The speech maintains an educational flow without concluding the topic, as it will continue into key points 4 to 6 in future sections. Why is it that pain returns with such haunting precision? Why is it that, no matter how much you grow, evolve, or distance yourself from your past, some wounds seem to circle back into your life, different in shape but identical in sensation? Many people believe they are cursed, unlucky, or perhaps doomed to repeat the same mistakes. But the truth is far more profound and far more redemptive. You are not attracting pain because of weakness or failure. You are attracting it because something in you remembers what you are trying to forget. The psyche is not like a straight road. It is more like a labyrinth. We move forward, but we also spiral. And within that spiral, the unhealed aspects of our past remain alive, waiting. When you do not listen to the wound, it does not vanish, it deepens. When you try to outrun the wound, it does not weaken, it hides in your decisions, in your relationships, in your emotional reactions. It becomes part of the very lens through which you experience life. And what is not made conscious will be lived as fate. Many people unknowingly live this loop. They change jobs, cities, friends, and lovers, and yet find themselves ensnared by the same emotional themes. Loneliness, abandonment, rejection, humiliation. It's not the outer world that repeats. It's the inner template that projects itself onto the outer screen of reality. The child who was not seen becomes the adult who feels invisible in every relationship. The adolescent who was betrayed becomes the grown man or woman who expects betrayal and unconsciously it again and again. These are not failures of character. They are calls of the soul. The wound is not trying to break you. It is trying to wake you. But how does it wake you? It begins with the appearance of chaos. Something doesn't go as planned. Someone fails you. A cycle of despair reemerges. This is the threshold, the point at which the unconscious is attempting to push its contents into the light of awareness. Pain is the signal. It is not random. It is intelligent. It knows exactly where you're still blind. What most fail to understand is that pain, especially recurring pain, is a language. It speaks in symbols. It is the voice of your inner world, the one that refuses to be silenced. It's easy to feel like a victim when the same heartbreak, betrayal, or loneliness returns. But you are not a victim. You are being shown something. Something that, until now, you were not ready to face. This brings us to the part of you that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The shadow. The shadow is not evil, as many assume. It is not something to be eliminated or destroyed. It is the rejected self, the hidden self, the self you were told you must suppress in order to be loved, accepted, or safe. And because you were taught to disown it, it went underground. It became unconscious. But unconscious does not mean inactive. The shadow may be buried, but it is not dead. It operates in secret, and it has one purpose: integration. Every time you repress a thought, a feeling, an instinct, you don't erase it. You exile it. And what is exiled returns. Not in its original form, but through projection, emotional turbulence, and life patterns that seem unexplainable. The anger you weren't allowed to express as a child becomes the partners you attract, who constantly express it for you. The fear you never admitted to yourself becomes the voice in your head that whispers you're not enough. The hunger for validation you buried deep down becomes the toxic need for approval from people who will never give it, and so you find yourself magnetically drawn to the same pain, not because you are broken, but because the shadow is trying to make itself known. It wants to return home. The soul seeks wholeness, and wholeness requires that nothing be left out, not even the parts you were taught to hide. There is a strange paradox in this process. You are most afraid of the very thing that will set you free. You run from your shadow because you were told it is shameful or dangerous. but it is only dangerous when it is unconscious. Once it is seen, it becomes your power. The woman who embraces her repressed anger becomes assertive, clear, and unshakable. The man who integrates his buried vulnerability becomes emotionally whole and deeply connected. The wound, once integrated, becomes wisdom. And yet, the unconscious doesn't simply hand over its secrets. It presents them through repetition. This is why we attract the same pain. We are not being punished. We are being given another chance to engage with what we have refused to face. You meet the same type of person. You fall into the same role. You feel the same emptiness. And just when you think you've escaped, it happens again. The unconscious recreates the original wound, not to break you, but to offer redemption through recognition. You are not doomed to repeat the past. But until the past is made conscious, it will repeat. Not because life is cruel, but because life is merciful. It gives you endless chances to heal. The first time it happens, you're unaware. The second time, confused. The third time, perhaps angry. But the fourth time, if you are listening, you begin to see, and that is where everything changes. The psyche doesn't operate on moral judgment. It operates on wholeness. It does not care if your shadow traits are bad or inappropriate by society's standards. It cares only that they are integrated, that they are seen. When they are not, they run your life from the basement. They influence your choices, your emotional patterns, your expectations. But when they are brought into the light, they lose their compulsive grip. You begin to live with freedom, not reaction. This process of bringing the unconscious into consciousness is not easy. It requires deep honesty. It requires that you sit with pain instead of escaping it. It demands that you ask uncomfortable questions. Why does this always happen to me? What am I avoiding? What am I projecting onto others? These questions can tear at your identity. But that is exactly the point. Your old identity was built in defense of the wound. To become whole, that identity must be examined, questioned, and eventually transformed. At the heart of this transformation is the realization that you are the common thread. It's not the world, it's not them, it's not fate, it's you. Not in a way that blames, but in a way that empowers. If it's you, then you have the power to change it. If the wound is yours, so is the healing. If the pattern emerges from your unconscious, then your consciousness can break it. But this power only emerges when you stop numbing, avoiding, or projecting. As long as you believe the pain is coming from out there, you remain powerless. But once you turn inward, once you dare to face the raw truth of your inner world, you begin to reclaim your life. And what you find is often astonishing. The very parts of you that caused the most pain were simply waiting to be heard. Your psyche is not your enemy. Your shadow is not your doom. Your wound is not your end. They are all part of your path toward becoming whole. The pain you keep attracting is not a curse, it is a guide. And it will continue to appear, again and again, until you no longer run, no longer numb, no longer externalize. It will repeat until you remember who you were before the world told you to forget. Until you become conscious of what lives in your shadow. Until you see that your suffering is not meaningless, it is precise, necessary, and strangely sacred. The moment you begin to see the pattern is the moment the pattern begins to loosen. Awareness weakens repetition. And with awareness comes responsibility, not the burden of blame, but the opportunity to rewrite the story. To meet the pain not as a victim, but as a seeker. To say, yes, I have seen this before, and this time, I will not run, I will listen. That is the threshold of transformation. That is the moment when your psyche, so long divided, begins to move toward unity. And what was once chaos starts to make sense. What was once suffering becomes a map. What was once darkness begins to glow with meaning. Certainly. Below is a continuation of the speech, expanding key points for 5 and 6 in approximately 2,000 words. The tone remains deeply introspective, motivational, and educational, rooted in the emotional and philosophical style of Carl Jung. The flow is continuous and intentionally left open for continuation in future keynotes. When you begin to sense that your suffering is not random, when you understand that the repeated patterns in your life carry meaning rather than misfortune, the next and perhaps most disturbing truth surfaces. The source of your pain may not be outside you at all. It may be a projection of what lies within, a reflection of a wound you have not yet had the courage to claim. And so, what you cannot see in yourself, you see in others. What you refuse to admit in your inner world becomes the characteristic you most resent in the outer one. Projection is a phenomenon as old as the psyche itself. It is the act of unconsciously attributing your own disowned traits, emotions, or desires onto someone else. We do this not because we are deceitful, but because we are deeply afraid. Afraid to acknowledge what we were told not to be. Afraid to accept parts of ourselves that don't align with our idealized self-image. And so, rather than feel the guilt, the shame, or the complexity of our inner conflict, we project it onto the world. We point our finger outward, and in doing so, we blind ourselves to the truth that could set us free. The anger you see in others may very well be your own suppressed fury. The pride you resent in another may be a mirror of your hidden need for recognition. The emotional neediness you criticize might reflect your own unmet longing to be held. We are drawn to and repelled by others in accordance with what we have not made conscious in ourselves. In this way, other people become our most potent mirrors, not because they are more powerful than us, but because they reflect the very things we refuse to see. This realization is humbling. It strips us of the illusion that our suffering is entirely caused by external forces. It invites us to take radical responsibility, not to blame ourselves, but to reclaim our power. As long as we remain unaware of our projections, we will continue to attract relationships and experiences that trigger us, frustrate us, or confuse us, and we will call it fate. But fate is often the name we give to our own unconscious patterns. The gift hidden in projection is that it provides a path back to the self. If you pay attention to what irritates you, to what you feel morally outraged by, to what you consistently judge in others, you will begin to map the edges of your shadow. And when you trace that map back inward, you will find the places where your truth has been silenced, your needs unmet, your potential distorted. The outer conflict becomes the gateway to inner clarity. To walk this path requires humility. You must be willing to admit, I don't fully know myself. And that admission is the most courageous act a person can make. It is the beginning of psychological maturity. For only those who are willing to confront their own contradictions can ever hope to become whole, and wholeness, not perfection, is the aim of the soul. When you no longer see others as enemies or saviors, but as reflections, you begin to reclaim your projections. And in doing so, you pull back the energy that has been trapped in illusion. That energy becomes available for consciousness, for creation, for healing. You stop living in reaction and begin living in response. You stop blaming and begin understanding. And through understanding, your pain transforms from a source of chaos into a source of insight. But what happens when you stop projecting? When the outer world no longer serves as your emotional scapegoat. You are left with what you've spent so long avoiding, your wound. And this is where many retreat. Because to face the wound directly, without distortion or distraction, is to enter sacred territory. It is where the ego's defenses are stripped away and something deeper emerges. A truth that cannot be denied. The wound, for most, is something to be numbed, ignored, or covered up with temporary distractions. We run from it in countless ways, through addiction, through achievement, through endless self-improvement. We try to be more spiritual, more successful, more lovable, all to avoid the quiet ache that waits in the silence. But the soul has no interest in your perfection. It seeks only your presence. And presence requires that you stop running. There comes a moment when the pain becomes too loud to ignore, when the old strategies no longer work, when distraction feels empty and escape feels exhausting. This moment, painful as it is also sacred. Because it is in this moment that the ego surrenders. It is in this moment that the wound is finally approached with reverence, rather than fear. To sit with your wound, not to fix it, not to justify it, but to simply be with it, is to enter the realm of deep healing. Here, words lose their power. Here, time becomes irrelevant. You are no longer analyzing your pain. You are inhabiting it, feeling its weight, listening to its voice. And what it tells you is not a diagnosis or a theory, but a story. Your story. One that has been waiting for years to be heard, not with the mind, but with the heart. You discover that the wound is not a flaw. It is a doorway. It holds memories, yes, but also meaning. It holds sorrow, but also strength. And if you listen closely, it speaks in symbols. The recurring dream, the persistent emotion, the pattern that keeps returning. These are not obstacles. They are messages. They are the psyche's way of saying, come home. And so, you learn to sit in the fire, not as a victim, but as an initiate. You let the pain teach you what pleasure never could. You let the silence reveal what noise kept hidden. And in doing so, you begin to trust something deeper than the surface. You begin to trust the intelligence of your suffering. This is not about glorifying pain. It is about recognizing its sacred function. Pain wakes you up. It breaks the illusion. It forces you to look where you refuse to look. It demands that you slow down, feel deeply, and reclaim the parts of yourself that were left behind. And when you do this, something extraordinary begins to happen. The wound, once faced, becomes a source of inner power. You are no longer held hostage by it. You are no longer ashamed of it. Instead, you walk with it. You carry it like a badge, not of victimhood, but of awareness. You no longer seek to erase your past. You seek to understand it. And in that understanding, the energy that was once trapped in pain becomes available for life. The chaos becomes clarity. The confusion becomes compassion. But this transformation cannot happen unless the wound is integrated. Integration is the final alchemy. It is not about fixing yourself. It is about reuniting with what was lost. It is about allowing all parts of yourself, the broken, the brilliant, the dark, the divine, to coexist. This is the meaning of becoming whole. To integrate is to stop rejecting. To integrate is to stop dividing your psyche into acceptable and unacceptable parts. To integrate is to welcome the inner orphan back into the house of the soul. This does not mean indulging every impulse or justifying every behavior. It means acknowledging, understanding, and rechanneling your inner forces. It means becoming conscious of what you used to repress and turning it into strength rather than shame. When you integrate, the cycle stops repeating, not because life becomes perfect, but because you are no longer fragmented. You are no longer acting from unconscious compulsion. You are making choices from wholeness, not from woundedness. You are speaking from authenticity, not performance. You are loving from abundance, not fear. This is the beginning of true freedom. A freedom that is not dependent on circumstances or other people. A freedom that arises from inner unity. You stop chasing. You stop fixing. You stop begging life to deliver you from your patterns. Because you realize the pattern wasn't the problem, unconsciousness was. And now, you are awake. The same people who once triggered you no longer have that power. The same situations that used to unravel, you now reveal your growth. You feel grounded in your being, not because you are invincible, but because you are integrated. The storm still comes, but you are no longer blown away by it. You have roots now. You have depth, and in that depth, you find clarity. Not the clarity that comes from logic, but the clarity that comes from lived truth. You know who you are, not as an idea, but as an experience. You have walked through your own darkness. You have faced your own demons. And now, you carry their wisdom, not their weight.